Welcome to the EMA's Fast Track Webinar Series. Today, I'm very happy to say we have Dr. Greg Winteregg as our guest. He set up a private practice in a small farm town, and by applying the Hubbard Management System, he was able to place his practice into the top 4% of all practices nationally. He has been the partner in one of the largest international dental practice management training companies for over 20 years. In that capacity, he has lectured to tens of thousands of doctors and their staff on the most workable system of business management technology, the Hubbard Management System. I'm very happy to have him here. He's going to be super interesting to listen to, so make sure you have a pen and paper to take notes, turn off your phones and your computer messages so that you're not disturbed while you're watching this webinar. Hi, Greg. Good to see you.
Hey, Jade. I'm very happy to be here.
Very cool. So what do you have for us today?
Well, I've got a topic that always gets me very excited about disseminating, and that is selling. And I've created a seminar that we're going to do here today in the webinar format called How to Sell Anything. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear it. Sounds very interesting.
So I just want to take 60 seconds. I've been in the Y sector now since 1993, so I've been around for a while. And everyone knows me, or at least I think most everyone knows me as a partner at MGE. We disseminate to dentists, and we've got the largest delivery group of the LRH admin tech in the world. And I've kind of worked myself into a position in the company where I power changed out of my day-to-day activities, and I'm still very active there. But I also have the goal and the intention to put a Hubbard College in Tampa this year, and a few of us here in Clearwater are working on that. And to support that effort, I started another company called Matterhorn Business Development. And the purpose of Matterhorn is to disseminate to general business owners, not just dentists. And my intention is to disseminate in the Tampa Bay area and create a foundation of public that we could route into a Hubbard College once it opens. So the objective is to get it open in 2019. It could be 2020. There's some red tape to get through. But this is a presentation that I'm giving to general business owners in different formats and different venues. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage here for what I'm up to here now in my dissemination efforts. And so I want to just jump right into the presentation here, because for me, it really was so helpful to really break down and talk about business basics. It can be so confusing and seems like everything is in motion when you're a business owner. You're trying to figure out how to function in your company or how to expand your company. And I really start every presentation with what I call Business Basics 101. And so if you're watching there and you have a sheet of paper, sticky note, whatever, for me, it's important that you make this first diagram. So write down sell. First you write sell on the left, and then you write deliver. And then underneath that, you write get new customers. And draw the arrows, because this pattern has to be in place. You have to be able to sell a product or service, deliver that product or service, and then get new customers to sell and deliver that product or service to. And the bottom line is most businesses get started with the owner having a product or service that they're very excited about being able to deliver, whether it's a professional service like in healthcare, dentistry, veterinary medicine, podiatry, whatever it might be. You could have a great pizza recipe. You think you can make a better hamburger than the competition. A dry cleaner's, a hardware store. You have something that you're going to deliver, whether it's a product or service. And what I noticed in my dental practice, if you didn't know, I graduated from dental school in 1981. and I became a client at MGE in the spring of '92. And what I noticed in those first 11 years in practice is whenever something was going on in the practice, then it was my idea, my thought is I really need to develop the next product, the next service to deliver. It's going to be bleaching. It's going to be a better denture. It's going to be orthodontics. It's going to be implants. And so literally I was running all over the country doing tons of continuing education through the 80s because I felt like the solution was to expand my delivery. Like I had to deliver better dentistry, more dentistry than the dentists in the area. And over the last 25 years, 2.5 decades, as I talk to business owners, I'm like, why is there no profit? Well, I'm investing it back in the company. I bought this $1 million piece of equipment, et cetera, but there's no admin tech, there's no marketing, there's no sales force. The owner is still the only one selling or the best one selling. And so I think this is pretty typical of most business owners, where you have a product or a service and you are trying to compete and out-compete the competition by delivering a better mousetrap. We just do mousetrap, right? So true, you have to have a good product or service. You do need new customers. But at the end of the day, you have to have everything rolling. It all has to be coordinated. Now, part of the issue here is, as you look at this diagram, sell has kind of become a 4-letter S word because there's so much misinformation, poor technology out there that a customer all of a sudden gets a little bit resistant. Like, don't sell me. They're tired of the pitch. And it can even flash back on the owner so harshly that they don't even want to sell. So the owner now is going to divert, refer the sales to someone else, et cetera, which is fine, but you have to be able to sell your product or service. And so I want to be talking about this today in this webinar. Like, we have to take a look at what's going on with sales training, what's going on with sales technology, if we want to look at it from that viewpoint. And I had that viewpoint when I became a client at MGE as a dentist, and that is doctors don't sell. Doctors don't talk money. And I had tons of consulting. I was listening to the best speakers in dentistry, and everybody had the same chant. Everybody had the same viewpoint. Doctor, it's not your job to sell. We're going to let Sandy do that. She's the financial secretary, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not a thought or an idea that just permeates dentistry. It's a thought or an idea that is very common in general business. So the first thing that I had to do for myself is I had to realize that it's my main goal and my main objective to actually help the customer. So we have to get rid of this idea that selling is bad, selling is high pressure, selling is all about the close. I mean, if you've done any sales training or watched anything online or read a book, typical false datum in the general sales world is ABC, always be closing. And I have a problem with that, because if I'm taught that and I'm walking up to you and in my mind right now, it's all about closing you, you're going to know that. Because as I approach you, my attention is all on me. I'm looking at, is my tie straight? How's my hair? Did I wear the right clothes today? Is this prospect going to be impressed with me? I have to remember now, when they say this, then I say, all of my attention is over here. Whereas in my view, selling is about helping the prospect. It's helping the customer solve a problem. So in today's world, everybody or many people are looking for that magic product where you can go on Amazon and you do a little bit of marketing and it's whiz bang, the sales shoot up, you don't have to have a sales force, and the product just sells itself. Kind of like Starbucks. Starbucks doesn't have to worry about their sales division. People like coffee. Some people may even be addicted to coffee, etc. Starbucks provides a product or service. So, okay, so that is that industry, but that's not the typical industry. Typical industry is the product or service has to be sold. And so when a prospect is approaching you, my viewpoint is they're approaching you because they have a problem. All we have to do is just get into communication with this prospect and help them solve their problem. So for me, it took all the pressure off of the selling process once I just focused on the prospect, and it was my sole intention to help them solve their problem. And we're going to circle back around on that because that really is just the key on how to sell anything. So let's carry on with the diagram now. So on this diagram, what I've done is I've encircled sell, deliver, and get new customers, and I'm calling and labeling that circle management. So these really are the only business basics that we have to focus on. We have to sell the product or service. We have to deliver a great product or service. We have to get new customers to sell and deliver to. And it's management's job then to hold the entire machine together. So management hires, fires, promotes to bring in prospects to be sold. Then the sales department sells the product or service. We deliver a quality product or service. I mean, it just really isn't any harder than this. L. Ron Hubbard had a management system that is taught at the Hubbard College. And this is a critical statement. It meant so much to me. Like day one, how do I start to handle all of the confusion and all the trouble that I was having in 1992 in my dental practice? Excellent quote from L. Ron Hubbard. He says, if one knows the tech of how to do something and can do it and uses it, he cannot be the adverse effect of it. Now, when I first heard it, I'm like, well, that sounds like a really smart statement, but now what exactly does it mean? So let's make this real with some examples. So we have this technology, right? It's awesome technology. And sometimes I'll sit there and I'll yell at my phone. Have you ever done that? You're yelling at your phone. You have this technology and you should be able to use it, but all of a sudden now you're the adverse effect of it. And so then I usually find someone about 30 or 40 years younger than me, and I say, can you show me how to do this? Oh yeah, you just do this, this, or this. Or like, oh, why do you have this on your phone? And so there's definite technology that we can be adverse effect of if we don't know how to use it. So Mr. Hubbard's view is that if you are the adverse effect of something, what adverse effect? Let's even talk about that. You're stressed out, you're worried, you're frustrated, it's taking too long to get something done, you're losing sleep at night, you're not making enough profit. Those are adverse effects. So you're looking for a technology, you have a problem, and you're looking for a technology that will help you solve your problem, whether it's in marketing, sales, delivery of the product or service, or organization and management of the company. So there's a technology that exists that can help you solve any of those problems. And once you know that technology and you can use and apply that technology, then you're no longer stressed out or worried in that area of your business. So Mr. Hubbard's viewpoint was that if you're having a problem, you're just the adverse effect. You just need to get the right technology to solve that problem. You need to apply that technology, and then all of a sudden you're no longer the adverse effect. So now let's go back to our Business Basics 101 diagram of sell, deliver, and get new customers to sell and deliver to, and then we organize and manage around that. So I have a question for you. Of these 4 items, marketing, sales, delivery of the product or service, and management, which of those 4 items is the most important? Now, we could have a debate. It would be an interesting debate and kind of fun, because we could debate each one of these. We could debate that, well, without a quality product or service being delivered, then marketing and sales is going to be wasted. And we have to have some leads, otherwise there's nobody to sell to. But if we can't sell, then there's no purpose for the product and service. And then management is really a mess, and they're holding back the rest of the company. So we can have a debate about any one of these 4 areas. But when it comes right down to making a profit, when it comes right down to keeping the doors open, when it comes right down to even having a business in the first place, Mr. Hubbard's view was sales is the most important. Because truly, without sales, there's no money for anything. And you can watch Shark Tank. I watch very little TV. I watch athletic contests, I watch movies, and I watch Shark Tank. And that's about the only thing I watch. And I love watching Shark Tank because an entrepreneur walks into that forum in front of, the sharks, and the music is a bit pensive, and they're all excited, and they have their pitch, and they have their product on display, and they're going along and they're explaining the product, and then the sharks will have questions about the product and how long have you been open. Look at your watch when they walk into that arena. Within 10 minutes, one of the sharks is going to say the question that determines whether this goes well or not well, whether it's a fast exit or a drawn out process where the sharks are arguing and bidding for this product or service. The question is, what are your sales? What are your sales? And if they say, well, I'm still in the developmental stage, these are just prototypes, I've borrowed money against my house and my parents' house, and my best friend gave me $100,000, and I'm actually 500,000 in, and last year we sold $12,000, they're done. It doesn't matter how excited the sharks were about the concept. If that entrepreneur in that forum, in that stage, on that arena, hasn't sold anything, we're done. Now watch the opposite. When they say, what are your sales? And they say, well, last year our sales were 500,000. We've been open for 24 months. We're projected to do 1.5 million this year. And all the sharks sit up straight. So here's the bottom line. If you can't sell, you have no company. If you can't sell, it doesn't matter how grand, how great the product or service is. And if you can't sell it, then you better find somebody else who can sell it. But if there are no sales, we have no business. And another question is, why do you need the money? What do you need the money for? Oh, I need more inventory. How much inventory do you have? Well, I got a warehouse full, but I'm going to start this other line now. And then it's like, no deal. No deal. They need to be marketing and selling. And so we circle back around now to sell. And actually, that can become a 4-letter S word sell. Like you'll even see ads like for a new position, no selling required. And that's a silly ad. What business stays open if the product or service isn't sold? So let's look at what Mr. Hubbard says exactly. This is from a lecture that he gave, I believe it was the early 60s. He says, the ceiling of income in the organization is placed by the sales line. Now, let's take a look. First of all, you're not going to make any more money than you can sell. That's what that sentence means. Now, what is a sales line? Well, first of all, a line is a straight distance between 2 points. So you're going to go from point A to point B. That's a line. You're not going to go from A up here, over there, and around in a circle and end up, that's not a line. So it's a sales line, meaning the customer has to go from this person to that person to that person in the sales process. And, today it's been called a sales funnel. Okay, I'm fine with that. So you have this product or service, and then you get them to talk to someone, and then they get something for free. And then, okay, so that's a sales line. But what does he say? The ceiling of income. If you're going to make money in business, you have to know how to sell, is the bottom line. And I want to talk a little bit now about a little bit more on what's being done that's incorrect in the sales world. And then what I'm going to talk about is my viewpoint on how to do it correctly. So we've all walked into the car dealership, on to the used car lot, and a very happy, cheerful representative walks up and says, "Hey, young man, what's it going to take to put you in that little beauty today?" They're like, "Are you impressed?" Okay, they're happy, they're cheerful, they have the right handshake, they're wearing the right clothes, whether they're male or female, but are you impressed? And I actually had this happen looking for a new home last year, and my wife and I went to an open house, and we're downsizing. So we're going from one style of home to a smaller style of home in a different price range. We're empty nesters now, etc. And the home that we're walking into is half the price of the home that we currently live in, which I'm fine on. But then the real estate agent, as soon as we walked in the door, did not ask me the first question. Asked me my name, that's fine. But then immediately like, is this not a magnificent dining room? You must see the kitchen. Look at this view. And everything about the dining room and the kitchen and the view was less than the home that I currently lived in. I was just ready to leave, but I did want to see the rest of the property. The downstairs was this beautiful game room per the real estate agent, and it was a nice game room, but it was not like my man cave with the 6-chair theater and the pool table and the foosball table and 2 flat screens and the bar. It was nothing like that. Not once. In 20 to 25 minutes, not once did that agent ever ask me anything about why I was there. Not one question. Not what brings you here today? Where do you live now? What kind of a home do you live in now? Why are you looking? Not one question. So needless to say, I didn't buy that house because it wasn't the house that I wanted, but I didn't like the agent. Quite honestly, if I did like that house, I would have found another agent to take me back to buy that house because I was completely repelled. I was completely repulsed from the pitch. But see, this goes back to where was that agent's attention? Was that agent's attention on himself and making the close? Or was it on me and helping me solve my problem? I'm there without an agent. I just went to an open house I found on Zillow. I'm obviously looking to buy a house, and that agent never asked me the first question about me. So this point I do need to make, I want to make, we're talking about a technology, and I love this next slide. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. So here is, for example, a slide, and it represents the right way to wash your car. You have soap, you have a sponge, water, you clean it all up, you rinse it off. So there's a right way to do it. Now the next slide I love, there's also a wrong way to do it. Now we still have soap and a sponge and water, but in this example, they've strapped the sponges to a dog. All right, so the dog is going to do great on the hood, the roof, and the trunk, but not so good on the tires and the fenders on the side. And there really is this stark of a difference in the right way and the wrong way to sell anything. And this is what I want to get into next. Now, this slide from Mr. Hubbard is called the ARC triangle. And I'm going to explain exactly what A, R, and C mean. It is not just for terminology's sake. It is not the arc triangle. It coincidentally spells the word arc, but this is correctly labeled the ARC triangle. Now let's start with the A. A stands for affinity. So I'm going to give you a couple of definitions here. Definition number one is the feeling of love or liking for something or someone. So if you have affinity for someone, you like them, you want to be around them, lots of affinity would be called love. My wife and I just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary. Obviously, we love each other. And so we have affinity for each other. And, you know, I just showed you my phone. Guess what? It's a BlackBerry. Maybe some of you caught that. I have affinity for my BlackBerry. I have affinity for those keys. My kids and everybody who sees that makes fun of me. That's okay. I'm 63 years old. I like the keys. That's what I have affinity for. So you can like an object, you can like a person, you can love a person. We're not going to discuss loving objects. That's an entirely different conversation for a different day. But the affinity has to do with love or liking. Now, let's take a look at definition number 2. This is a really interesting definition. He says, definition 2 of affinity is willingness to occupy the same place as the thing which is loved or liked. So now affinity has to do with distance. So the greater the affinity, the less the distance. So the more you like somebody, the closer you want to be to them. The more you like something, the closer you want to be to it. The less you like somebody, the further away you want to be. There's probably somebody in the world right now that if they are on the moon, they're still just a little too close to you because you're done with them. They can get into the I'm going to Mars program and you're fine. Mars is a good place. It's far enough away. So affinity has to do with distance. The greater the affinity, the less the distance. The less the affinity, the greater the distance. So that's just a very important point. And I'm going to tie all this together with regards to sales here in just a moment. Now, we're going to go to the R corner next. Now, R stands for reality. Now, I'm going to again give you 2 definitions of reality. Definition number 1 is solid objects. So solid objects are real. Here's my phone. It's a solid object. Here's my watch. It's a solid object. So it's real. Fair enough. Now, definition number 2, when it comes to sales, is the critical definition. Mr. Hubbard's view on reality and his definition, his second definition of reality, was reality is fundamentally agreement. Again, that sounds like a nice philosophic statement, but how is that practical? So let's go to my watch. Again, so we have my watch here. It's real. It's a solid object. All right. But did you ever wonder why we call this a watch? It's actually kind of strange that we call this a watch because we don't watch it. Interesting, isn't it? Why do we call this a watch? There's only one reason why we call this a watch. We call this a watch because we agreed to call it a watch. So somewhere, sometime, someplace, somebody designed a timepiece that could be worn on their wrist. And today we call that timepiece that's worn on the wrist a watch. We could probably go back into the Encyclopedia Britannica and we could find out just exactly how that name evolved. How did it come about so that we call the timepiece we wear on our wrist a watch? Because it's kind of silly. We don't watch it. Personally, it would make more logical sense if we called it a glance? I mean, I don't watch my watch. I glance at it, don't you? You glance at it. Oh, it's this time, and then you're right back to what you're doing. So it would make more logical sense to call it a glance, but we call it a watch. So here's the bottom line on the R corner. Whatever you agree with is your reality. It's just that simple. So that's critical when dealing with prospective customers, prospects that you want to sell something to. And here's where you must be careful. When they walk up and they make a statement, I'm here to buy a black car, but you have tons of white cars in inventory, and you really, for your own gain and intention on you, want to sell a white car because all your black cars are gone. And as soon as they say, I'm here to buy a white car, you go, oh, no, you don't want a white car, you want a black car. Or I'm here to buy a black car, and all you have is white ones. And you say, no, you don't want that, you want this. And you're immediately in the always be closing mode, and all of a sudden you're disagreeing with the prospect, or they say something that comes out of their mouth, and from this particular industry where you're selling, whatever they're saying is completely wrong, false, and ridiculous. And all of a sudden you're into your pitch. Bad mistake. And you're going to see why they're not going to like you and why they're going to walk away. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. All right. So key point from the R corner is whatever somebody agrees with is their reality. Now, selling is changing that reality and changing their mind. So we're going to cover that next. The next corner is the C corner. And the C corner is communication. Now, communication is an interchange of ideas between two people. So two people have to be exchanging ideas and going back and forth in order for there to be communication. So there has to be a discussion. And two people yelling at each other, this one says blue, this one says red, stupid red people, stupider blue people, and they're just yelling their realities. That is not communication. Communication is an exchange. Let's go back to the open house that I went to. What am I complaining about? The representative was never in communication with me. It was just sales pitch, sales pitch, sales pitch, sales pitch. This item, this item, this item, and you're really going to love the game room. And it was kind of like pretty not good. So anyway, you have to ask questions. Here's the point. To get the prospect to talk to you, you have to ask questions. And in my viewpoint and how to sell anything, the questions have to be about them and their product. The reason they're on the lot, the reason they walked into your business. Hi, how may I help you? Not like, hey, that's a really nice watch you got there, sir. I think I'm going to go get me one of those. Where did you get your watch? But you're not in a jewelry store. You're at a real estate agency. So the point here, in order to get the prospect to speak with you, you have to ask questions, and the questions have to be about them and their problem and why they're in front of you. And again, I think it needs to go back to help. Hi, my name is Greg. How may I help you today? Well, let me tell you, I'm here to find a blah, blah, blah. Oh, really? That's very interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that problem. Now you're in communication. Now this is critical because here's what Mr. Hubbard found. Affinity, reality, and communication equals understanding. This is a formula. So the formula is very simple. People you like, people you agree with, and people you talk to, you understand them and they understand you. People you don't like, people you disagree with, and people you don't talk to, you don't understand them and they don't understand you. So these three, affinity, reality, and communication, are all linked and they equal understanding. Now that leads us into the very next slide because there's a law that Mr. Hubbard found. It's very interesting. This research goes back to 1950. So this has been played out over the many decades. And there is a law. What he found is one can't cut down one without cutting down the other two. Meaning you can't lower one corner of the ARC triangle without lowering the other two corners. Now, this is a critical concept. So if the prospect walks up and they're asking for a black one, and you immediately tell them they're wrong, they should want a white one, that's a disagreement. They're not, all of a sudden, you are not real. And immediately, they're not going to like you, and they're going to want to get away. I totally wanted to leave that open house. Although I was there to see the open house, I had made time to go to the open house, but within 60 seconds, literally, I did not want to be around this agent. Did not like the agent. I did actually not want to talk and communicate with the agent because it was all about him and his pitch. So if you create a disagreement, then the prospect is not going to like you. They're going to hang up. They're going to walk away. They're going to go down the road to your competition, and they're not going to want to talk to you. It's a law, and they're totally not going to understand you. They're going to walk away thinking that you're whatever, weird, pushy, money motivated, whatever, lack of product knowledge. I mean, there's going to be something, and they're just going to leave. All right. Now, what's the solution? Well, fortunately, the opposite is true. And here's what Mr. Hubbard found, is that you can't rehabilitate one corner without rehabilitating the other two, meaning you can't increase one corner of the ARC triangle without increasing the other two corners. So let's take a look at a disagreement that you've had with a friend or a loved one. You sit down and you say, what's happening here? What are you upset about? I always make the joke, if this is with your wife, you say, honey, what happened? She goes, you know. And this is 38 years of marriage, folks. You know. You totally know. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't. What did I do? And guys, we always know that it's our fault. Right, ladies? It's always our fault. Our fault. It's always our fault, the guy's fault, right? So I'm like, I actually don't know. Well, when you said this, I felt that. And I'm like, really? Is that what you thought I said? Yes. When you say this, that really makes me upset. And I'm like, well, I thought I said this. No, I heard this. So we had a misunderstanding. We had a miscommunication. So I was talking about this. She thought I was talking about this. And now we have what? No understanding. So the point here is to create ARC, you ask questions. You ask questions about the prospect and how you can help them solve their problem. They are there because they have a problem. Now, is this a massive problem and it's overwhelming them and they're losing sleep, or is it just a little bit of a problem? Well, you just have to ask more questions and find out. And that's how motivated your buyer is going to be. How big of a problem is it? But the next slide is critical. And again, this is over decades of research. What did Mr. Hubbard find? The most important corner of the ARC triangle is communication. If you knock communication out, you lose everything. So if you are not in communication, there's no chance of affinity, there's no chance of agreement, and there's no chance of understanding. So then what is selling? It's very simple. You get into communication with a prospect about their reality. Now, the initial phrase, statement out of their mouth could be 100% wrong. They went online, they got misinformation, or some friend gave them an idea. So they walk in and their reality is not actuality. Like, how is it really? It's just something that they agreed with. Okay, well then, how do you change their reality? How do you change their mind? First of all, you say, oh, you know, I hear that a lot. A lot of people have that idea, but here's what I have found. Let me show you this literature. Let me show you this research. Let me show you this product. And now you're in communication. And you can say, do you have any questions about this new way of thinking? Or does that make sense? Or is that something you agree with? Is that something you're interested in? All the questions are about them. It really is not a pitch. If you find that you're doing all of the talking, there's no ARC. It's just a huge mistake. You're doing all the talking. I mean, you need to ask questions and let them talk. That will build ARC. And what's going to happen is they're going to like you. So you're going to steer and guide the conversation and ask them questions about themselves. Now, all of this leads up to Mr. Hubbard's definition of hard sell. I'm not going to show you the definition yet. Hard sell, oh, that's bad. Keep that away from me, because hard sell is ripoff. It's overwhelming. It's not caring. It's all about the money, selling the customer something they don't need, a high-pressure timeshare sales presentation, and that is not the definition of hard sell within the Hubbard management system. This is a genius and brilliant definition, and you may want to rewatch this part of this several times before it sort of kind of starts to sink in, because it's the foundation of everything I've been talking about up to this moment. Let's take a look at this definition. It means caring about the person and not being reasonable about stops or barriers, but caring enough to get him through the stops or barriers to get the service. So Mr. Hubbard's definition of hard sell is what I've been talking about. It's about affinity. It's about liking the customer. It's about caring for the customer. And the customer walks in with one reality, and that's their reality at the moment. And you're like, you know, immediately, that's wrong. It's bad in this arena, in this industry. Like, it couldn't be further from this truth. So then using ARC, what do? You change their reality from this to this. And some people, it may take minutes, and some people, it may take hours. Why in the world would you spend hours changing their mind from this reality to this one? Well, it's because you care. Now, of course, there's a commission in it or some sort of a reward for the sales rep. All right, well, that's fair. That's how that sales rep can continue to sell. But why would you spend hours with somebody? Because they show up with a problem, you actually have some affinity for them, and you're willing to sit there and explain and re-explain and ask more questions and go to their home or take them for a test drive or whatever the situation might be, so that you can change their reality from this, which is not going to help them solve their problem, to this, which is going to help them solve their problem. You would do that because you care. And again, it's not meant to overwhelm the prospect. It's not meant to trick them into paying. It's not meant to take advantage of the prospect, selling them something that they don't need. It has none of that, because that's not caring. My rule is I'm not going to do something to a prospect or sell a prospect something that I personally wouldn't want myself. I'm not going to do something to a prospect that I wouldn't want somebody to do to me. So now, all of a sudden, as far as I'm concerned, this gets very, very simple. We care about the customer. We ask them questions to find out what their reality is, have them explain the problem. Then we use data, information, and good communication to steer them into like changing their mind, or you show them with good communication how your product or service can help them solve their problem. And that's what it's all about. Now, there's one other part about this that is very important, and let's go back to this definition of hard sell. He says it means caring about the person and not being reasonable about stops or barriers. Now, we must have the right definition of reasonable, because that's a critical word in that definition. So Mr. Hubbard went on to define reasonable. And again, these definitions are not in Webster's dictionary. This material is from the Hubbard Administrative Technology. So his definition within the Hubbard Administrative Technology for reasonable is accepting faulty explanations. So the customer is there, and maybe the product or service is going to cost them a little bit more than what they were prepared to spend. And they will say, I just don't have that kind of money. Now, that's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And if you've been taught different sales techniques, it's the moment to just immediately disagree and say, but this is an investment in you. This is an investment in your health. This is for your family. This is for your children. And you start to argue about whether they have the money or not, whether the product is worth that or not. So let's just boil it down. Is that an accurate statement? I really don't have that kind of money. So then what I like to do, and you're going to have to develop what's real to you, is like, okay, let's take money out of the picture, right? If it was free, is this the product or service that you would want? Well, it was free. Of course I would want it. Okay, great. So now we just have to like talk about how valuable it is to helping you solve your problem. So let's use the number 5,000. So this product is $5,000. Just level with me. If you had to, could you put $5,000 on a credit card? Oh, I can definitely put it on a card, but I'm not going to do it for that. What did we just identify? We just identified that I don't have that kind of money is faulty. Accepting a faulty explanation is the definition of reasonable. So you're going to be unreasonable and say, okay, listen, I understand you have the money, but you don't want to spend it. Let's circle back around. Then you start asking them questions about their problem again. So you walked into my store because you have this problem. So are you losing sleep? You just go back and you kind of rehash how big of a problem is it? I mean, is this something that's keeping them awake at night? And if it's not a big problem, and in their mind it's real to them that they would never spend $3,000, then you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to sell them something that costs less, give them a lesser version of it. I am totally against discounted services and fees. And, well, if I did this for $4,000 today, would we have a deal? I mean, you're going to have to do whatever's real to you on that one. But I spend more time elevating the value of the product rather than just jumping into discounting the price of the service. That's a debate for another day. But here is the point, is when somebody's giving you a stop and a barrier, is it faulty or legit? So the wife is there without the husband, and the wife can say, well, before I make any kind of a decision like this, my husband and I have this agreement that we always talk it out. Now, is that true or not true? I don't know. Is that faulty or legit? I don't know. So what I always like to do is I look at her and I say, so when you go home and you tell your husband this is going to be $5,000, what is he going to say? You don't know. Usually she says, well, he's going to ask me if I want to buy it. Well, then what do I say? Do you? And then I get the legitimate, well, this is actually not quite the color. I think it's a little bit too big. Oh, now you have the legitimate stop and barrier and say, well, we have it over here in this color, or I can order it. It can be shipped here in 2 weeks. But see, now we're into the legitimate stop and barrier and not some faulty stop and barrier. So it really is an entire hour-long seminar about how to handle objections and stops and barriers. But the point that I want to make here is you have to find out, by not being reasonable, you have to find out is if the stop or barrier is faulty or legitimate. And that generally boils down to the money. It's usually going to pop up when you're talking about the money. Okay? So I have about 10 minutes here, and I want to cover the final topic that I think is just critical in sales. Like how do you spend your time wisely? You have 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever you have in a work day to talk to prospects and sell them products and services. How do you get the most out of that time? All right. So I want you to take a look at this diagram. And this is what I call the scale of sales resistance. So first of all, 20% of the population is going to be pretty easy to sell. They almost call you up or walk into the store and place their order. And so they've already got it figured out. They've been referred by a friend. They know what they're looking for, and they're really here. Like, I want that over there. How do we get this? How fast can I get it? And that's basically just taking the order. So 2 out of 10 customers, 1 out of 5, pretty much that you talk to or approach, they're kind of in that mode. And part of the problem with just getting into the pitch of it all and throwing data at them, that they've already made their decision, and that 20 or 30 minutes is a complete waste of everybody's time. So how may I help you? well, I'm here to buy that over there. My friend just got one. She recommended me in here. Is your name Greg? She said, ask for you. Yes, well, right over here. So, yeah, that's the one. I'd like it in red. Hers is in green. And you take the order rather than, oh, what a beautiful piece of furniture this is, et cetera, and you're kind of into your pitch. Again, that's not communication. But here's the point. 20% of the people are just ready really to just give you the order, right? And if you get in communication with them, it'll all go very smoothly. Now, at the opposite end of this scale is an interesting group. 20% of the customers that you talk to, potential customers, prospects, are trouble. They're pure trouble. And we can all tell stories about that person that we sold, and we took the $5,000 and we wish we had never seen them, because at that moment, nothing was right. It was just, everything was wrong. And in the end, they got their money back after, 6, 8, 10 weeks of going back and guess what? 20% of the population is trouble. It's called Pareto's Law, P-A-R-E-T-O. You can go online, Google it, and there's all kinds of 80-20 rules in every industry, et cetera, et cetera. So 20% of the population is trouble, and they just need to kind of like move on down the road, because they'll chew up 2 or 3 or 4 hours of your time, knowing that they're not going to buy, stringing you along, and walk away, and they just kind of had fun with you. It's kind of funny, strange, whatever you want to call it, but definitely that's back on the rep for not weeding that person out from the beginning. So we'll circle back around to that in a moment. Now, the 60% in the middle actually can be sold a product or service. So it's possible. And I am here to tell you, you are going to succeed or fail in sales based on how well you can sell the 60% group in the middle. If you can sell them, you're going to be a rock star. And if you can't, you're just going to be an average sales rep who kind of like goes from paycheck to paycheck. Now, what I've done in my mind is I take that 60% in the middle and I break it down into 3 different groups. And this is my gradient scale of sales resistance. So if we take that and we break that middle group down into thirds, the first group I actually call easiest. They actually sell us. We don't sell them. And they give us their order. Now, the next 20%, the 20 to 40% group, I call easier. So they're easier to sell than everybody to the right of them, but they're going to give you some stops and barriers. They're not easiest. They're not just going to give you the order. And when you ask them to pay, they're not going to be so willing to pay. And like I said before, the spouse isn't there, or wow, I really need to think about this, etc. So in this group, the 20 to 40% group, the easier group, they have the financial qualifications. They do have a problem that you can help them solve, but they're just not so readily going to close. So what you do is you stay in communication and you continue to work them through their stops and barriers, handle anything that's faulty, communicate with them about anything that's legitimate, and just kind of hang in there, and you'll close this group. Now, I want to point out one thing, and this is back to Pareto's Law, the 80-20 law, and studies have been done. You can find these studies. 80% of the sales in most companies, 80% of the sales come from 20% of the representatives. That means that 20% of the sales are coming from 80% of the representatives, and all that means is the 80% of the representatives are just taking orders from the 20% easiest customers. So just think with this. If you can close this next group, the easier group, and you should actually, out of today's presentation, be able to make a dent into that next group by just asking them questions, developing some ARC. It's all about them, helping them solve their problem. If you could close the 20 to 40% group, mathematically, your statistics double. You were selling the 20% easiest, and now you're selling the next group easier. You've gone from 20% closes to 40% closes, and your statistics double. And honestly, you can take a huge step in that direction by watching and re-watching this webinar here, okay? Now, I do need to cover the rest of this scale of sales resistance here. So let's look at the next group. The 40 to 60% group I call the mid-range of difficulty. So maybe their credit cards are maxed out. Their credit is okay. When you say, well, we have financing available. No, I really don't want to borrow for this purchase. Okay. They probably have decent credit and you have a finance program and you'll probably get them approved. But we have to then go back to what's the problem? What kind of pain are they having from that problem? How big of a problem is it? And you have to be better to close the mid-range than the easier. And it really takes nobody to close the easiest. So here we have our gradient scale. So the mid-range is more difficult. Now, finally, the last group, the 60 to 80% group, I call difficult. This group is going to be difficult to sell. Either the problem isn't that big, the finances are legitimately not there, it's not really that big of a deal, they're just a disagreeable kind of person. So when you run into this group over here, it's going to take more time. And again, 20% of the sales representatives can handle that close. But let's just talk about something real. Let's talk about keeping this on a gradient. So let's just focus not on the trouble, not on the difficult, not even on the mid-range. This week, let's just focus on this group of the 20 to 40% easier ones to close. Now, this is the final part of this. As far as I'm concerned, in my 35 years of sales experience, all right, there are two factors that determine where the prospect is on this grid of sales resistance. The first of those factors is money. Do they have a lot of money or do they have very little money? Do they have good credit? Do they have poor credit? So money and credit are going to take someone from the left side of that grid to the right side of that grid, to take them from easiest over to difficult. Again, the trouble, they can just go to your competition. So the money qualification does need to be done, but it's not done at the beginning. Like, hey, young man, what's it going to take you to put you in that little beauty today? You got a budget. I know you got a budget. You got a number. What's that number? $350, $450 a month? Is that the payment? So no, that's not how we do this. We find out about their problem. We ask a lot of questions. You make sure that your product or service can help them solve their problem. And then you tell them how much it's going to cost. And then we're going to have to get into, how big of a pain point is this problem causing them. All right. So all of that is part of this. But again, I want you, after watching this video, to just go out and look for that next gradient step, the easier ones. You ask them a few questions. You keep kind of going back to the pain point, the problem you're trying to solve. If you just hang in there, then I'm telling you, you're going to close that group. And one final point that I want to make just with regards to that easier group is you tell them 3 times. And that's out there everywhere, but just to remind you, you ask them about their problem, you're communicating, you go for the close at least 3 times. If that doesn't work, then my view is you sell them something maybe that they were looking for, a lesser product, a lesser price, a lesser range of program, whatever it might be. Now, the final thing here, what I've found that determines whether someone is on the left side of the grid or the right side of the grid is their attitude. They either have a good attitude about the product or service or being sold, or they have a bad attitude about the product or service or being sold. So on the left side of the grid, you have people who are financially qualified and they have a great attitude about the product or service or being sold. And as you move to the right, they're less financially qualified and they begin to have a worse and worse attitude. They're less willing to get in communication. They're more disagreeable. They have it all figured out. Let me tell you how this is going to go down, et cetera, et cetera. So to kind of pull this together now in just a quick 2-minute summary, when you're selling someone, your attention has to go off of you and the attention has to be on that prospect. And you're there to help the customer solve a problem. It has to be questions. There have to be questions that you're going to ask to get them into communication with you to identify their reality. And then if their reality is off the mark, then use diagrams, explanations, etc., to change their mind. And you keep rolling back to the original question, how can I help you? And then they're going to describe your problem. And you are going to have to go for the close. You are going to have to talk about the money. They're going to usually give you some faulty explanations. You just have to expect that. But then for me, what's most successful, say I fully understand, you don't want to spend that kind of money, but initially you said your problem was this. And so you just go back and you keep repeating that. And what's been successful for me, especially with this easier group of the 20 to 40% group, the easier ones to sell, is if I just go back, I tell them 3 times, I reinforce why they're there 3 times, re-ask the question, is there anything more to the problem that I can help you solve, etc. 3 times is the key. Everybody watching this should be able to double their sales or take a big step in that direction just by keeping in a few basic points. And the final thing I'll say is you may not have heard this before, and you may be thinking as you're approaching that prospect, always be closing or some other rule. And this is going to take some time. That's a habit that you've developed over months or years. For some of you, maybe decades. And this is going to take some time. So my advice is, especially initially, you rewatch this webinar at least once a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Grab the pieces right now that you can use. And I promise you, if you watch it again in 2 or 3 weeks, or you watch it again in a month or 2, and you've been using some of this and it's helpful, you're going to watch it and there's going to be something else. You go, I didn't catch that the first time. Did they change the video? They've edited this since the last time I watched it. Well, obviously we haven't. But right now there are certain things that you need to change and focus on. And just go ahead and work on those things and then rewatch it. So I really enjoy this approach. As far as I'm concerned, it takes all the pressure and the stress out of selling. All I'm doing is I'm just talking to the prospect. I have a product or I have a service that is going to help them, and I just stay in communication with them, and I'm there to just help them solve their problem. So I hope you've gotten something out of this. I hope that you watch it again. And Jade, I've really enjoyed being able to do this webinar with you here today.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed listening. This is incredible data.
Thank you.
Information is like, wow, I've been taking notes and I'm going to be using it in my sales. So yeah,
Great.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed it and I'm very happy to have been here.
Thank you.